How's it going, guys? Welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny, bringing you guys some more discussions and storylines around the NFL and just college in general. A rundown for the show for today is the usual Chip Shot segment of the first part of the show. I'm going to be talking about Justin Fields and some comments that he made on the St. Brown's Brothers podcast, the 33rd team, talking about his situation with the Bears and just how he's feeling about the whole thing. Later, or just in that same segment, I'll talk about a list that I saw on ESPN, Mike Greenberg's list on some scenarios that he would like to happen. One that caught my eye was a trade for Devante Adams to the New York Jets from the Las Vegas Raiders. I'll give you my thoughts on that. After that, I have some college football to talk with you guys about, the NIL situation, the transfer situation in college, and just a report from Adam Schefter on the whole climate around college football and how some coaches are frustrated with the situation, and more on that. After that, I'll stick with college football to some sorts and talk about Caleb Williams and the news that broke out, somewhat I guess you could say, about him not choosing to hire an agent representing himself, and talking about the negatives and the positives that come along with that, before wrapping it all up with a discussion, as usual, to end the show, surrounding the topic of drafting a quarterback, a franchise quarterback perhaps, if you feel that he's your guy, regardless of how good your team is, what sort of state, the quality level of your team. Or do you wait, acknowledge that you might not be ready to win now, and trade away the pick and stockpile in other areas that you might need to improve on? That's going to be the end of the show. A lot of good topics for you guys today. And before I jump into the first segment, I want to acknowledge that the network gets a lot of questions during the live episode. So if you get any questions and you want to interact with me during the show with the live chat, make sure to use the link that's running across the ticker down below me, and even bigger here to my left. The tip and donations link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. If you have any questions, just make sure to use that link as well. The link again is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. This just makes sure I'm able to see your question. It pops up here to my right-hand side at the top of the list, and I can interact with you guys, engage with you guys, and anything that you might have to say. I can read it live on air. And on top of that, it's also just a massive help for not only this show, but the network and other shows across all the channels that we have here. So if you guys could do that, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. But that being said, we can jump into the first segment, the Chip Shots segment of the day. A couple stories that I wanted to go over with you guys. The biggest one, the first one that I wanted to touch on, is more Justin Fields news. He was recently on Amon-Ra St. Brown's and Equanimous St. Brown's podcast, the 33rd team. And they just had him on there talking about the offseason, what his situation looks like. And, just conducting a regular interview. They asked him, of course, about his situation with the Chicago Bears. And I'm sure everyone has seen it. If not, you probably will see it at some point. The quote that's going around when Amon-Ra asked him about what's going on with him, the Bears, and if he would like to stay, he said, Of course I want to stay. I can't see myself playing in another place. If it were up to me, I'd want to stay in Chicago. I love the city. The city's lit. The fans are great. And, a lot has been made about Justin Fields and what will eventually happen. I assume everyone thinks he's going to be traded with the NFL Combine coming up. Everyone in the football world is going to be there, and a lot of people are anticipating that's where the details will be worked out for him to finally move on from Chicago. But he gave his feelings on it. I assume most people would predict he would have said something like that. He wasn't going to go out and say that he wants to leave Chicago. He can't wait to get out of here. He gave the politically correct answer and said all the right things. And I'm not saying it's fake. I'm sure he truly feels like that. Like most people, I think he thinks that he hasn't really gotten a fair shot of it. He definitely thinks he could do more there with the team. And after a pretty solid last year, I know they finished 7-10, but there were instances in some games where the team looked pretty well. The offense was running pretty well with him, and just the execution, the play calling, and everything. I'm sure he wants to build on that, but obviously it's not up to him and what he wants to do. The team will always do what is best for them in their interests, but he gave his feelings on that, and this all sort of started to become an uproar of sorts just when people realized recently that he stopped following the Chicago Bears on Instagram and also just basically removed them from Instagram. And he actually touched on that as well when they asked him about it on the St. Brown's Brothers podcast, that he basically just said he kind of wants to get away from everything. He wants to unplug. He's about to go on vacation. He didn't only just unfollow the Bears. He unfollowed the NFL and accounts associated with the NFL. And, that makes sense for anybody. He must hear his name even more than anybody that's a fan in the media itself says his name. He must hear it a lot more than anybody else. So he just wants to get away with it. He clarified that all up, and he basically said just because he unfollowed the Bears doesn't mean he's done with them. He doesn't want anything to do with them. It was just a matter of unplugging for the offseason, at least for a bit, before he can get back into it. And all that makes sense. And it's just funny how now if you want to get any news, see what people's true intentions are and feelings are, a lot of people just put their feelings out there on social media. And it's just funny to think about that and look back to probably just 10 years ago, where people, if they wanted to say something, clarify something, they would just go out and say it in a press conference or like a press release or something like that. To advance this far and see where it is now, where everybody has a platform to say something and they'll use it to say anything that's on their mind. And the news media will just go straight to Instagram and probably find out about 90% to 95% of what they're looking for. But that's how it all kind of started. That was the one story. The second thing I wanted to talk about was on ESPN. I saw, I think a few days ago now, Mike Greenberg, the host of Get Up in the Morning, had his top 5 list of things that he wished to see this offseason in trades, free agent signings. One of them was trading Devante Adams from the Las Vegas Raiders to the New York Jets. And, if you're a fan of ESPN or anything like that, Mike Greenberg's a Jets fan, you kind of know where that's coming from. But it also makes sense in some way because a lot was made of Devante Adams leaving the Green Bay Packers, not happy with his situation with them. Once Aaron Rodgers left, it all kind of, the story was written in itself that he was also going to be gone. And, he joined up with Derek Carr, his old college teammate, at Las Vegas. And evidently that didn't work out to the best as he would hope, how everybody thought it would have worked out. Derek Carr now obviously on the Saints, and Devante Adams still there. And it all pretty much has been downhill for Adams. He hasn't had the quarterback level, obviously, up in Aaron Rodgers. It's hard to find anybody to that level, but regardless of that, he definitely expected more success, as did I, and I'm sure other people did when Devante Adams signed there, just because of the kind of player he is, the talent level that he has. He hasn't really gotten that, and now they're in another sort of transition period with Antonio Pierce coming in. He now gets the full reins of the operation. He gets to be the full head coach, hire his staff, and everything kind of runs through him. And I think that's a good thing. I was a fan of Antonio Pierce getting hired. I think his period as the interim head coach was very good for this team. All the guys within the organization just seem to gravitate towards him, love him as a person, on top of just being their head coach, showing him the respect as the head coach. Everyone just seemed to really get along with him as a person and appreciate his personality, because he is a former player, and like most players, I assume in the NFL would agree that when you get a former guy in there, he understands what it's like being in their shoes. It's a lot easier to like the guy and play hard for him if he's really invested like Antonio Pierce has been with them. But just on the topic of the trade, I do see the logical side of it. It makes sense if Devante Adams really wants to, if he's really unhappy with his situation in Las Vegas, sure, I don't see an issue with him going to rejoin with Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers would love that. The Jets would love that because they need somebody else to complement Garrett Wilson. But it all connects with the Antonio Pierce situation. I think if that situation would have blown up and the Raiders wouldn't have found somebody as passionate and caring for the Raiders as much as Antonio Pierce is, I think Devante Adams would jump on this opportunity. But I find it hard to believe now because of all the positive feelings that Antonio Pierce has kind of gravitated towards him and the Raiders. Any interview you see of Antonio Pierce, they ask him about it, and you can see really how much he cares about the organization. And I think Devante Adams sees that, and like most players on the Raiders, want to play for a guy like that. And I think it'd be hard for Adams now because I think with a new coach that he seems to truly believe in, I don't think he'd just leave him like that. I think if he really wanted to leave, more rumors would have surfaced by now, but nothing has really been said on that situation. And I think if you're the organization of the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't think you can afford to do that. Again, because you're trying to build something special here with Antonio Pierce. You see how he's gathered the community. He has this good feeling about him. Everybody has positive feelings about him towards him. You don't want to kind of handicap him now, take away his most influential player on offense, arguably the whole team other than Max Crosby. You don't want to push him a step back now and force him to do even more work after a pretty successful end of the regular season last year now in the past, and that's something to definitely build on. Of course, they need a quarterback to help Devante Adams, but I don't think the organization or Devante Adams really up till this point are rushing to get it out of there or get Devante Adams out of there. And the idea seems good for the Jets, right, most of all, but I just don't see it happening because of the Raiders. They're trying to build something there, and I think Antonio Pierce has kind of settled everything down for that organization, and they can finally have someone, a leader, a true leader of men and players that they could get behind and be pretty comfortable and trusting in him to lead them in the right direction. But that was my reaction to those stories. Very interesting stuff, and I thought it would definitely garner some good conversation around those two topics. But I'm going to send it to a quick break right now. That'll be the end of the first segment. And on the other side of the break, I'll jump into some more college football stuff and the atmosphere around college football, how some coaches feel about it, per the reports of Adam Schefter, and some recent hires from college football to the NFL. That'll be coming up, as well as some comments made by Jay Billis on his solutions to college and the transfer portal and NIL as well. So stick around for that conversation, and I'll be right back after the first break here.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk some more football, but this time college football. For one of the first times on this show. If you missed the first segment, I recapped some of the chip shot stories that I brought up, some comments made by Justin Fields that he made on the St. Brown's Brothers podcast the last few days, and I also brought up the idea of Devante Adams possibly being traded to the New York Jets and my reactions to that. And now we can get into some college football around the biggest story probably recently in college football, and just will be the main story probably going on for a while in college football. It's NIL, the transfer portal, and everything, the feelings surrounding that. But just to jump into it now, Adam Schefter reported recently just some transactions of college coach, the USC running back coach, Keel McDonald, was being hired to the Chargers staff for Jim Harbaugh. And, that transaction, that event that happened, nothing seems wrong with that. But then a few minutes later, Adam Schefter retweeted that news that he posted. And he posted something I thought was pretty interesting, just because he said in his tweet that a trend that has emerged recently is that many college coaches are tired of the transfer portal, the NIL money, and the new NCAA world, and prefer to work in the NFL. Many college coaches already have left. Many more want to. And that last part was the most interesting part to me. Many more want to leave the situation in college football as it stands now. And I'm not going to go into whether I think it's right or wrong with NIL, the transfer portal, and everything. Just because it's a lot to unpack and it's a lot to give my opinion on, because, on one hand, you can see the logic of it, these players getting paid for all they do, especially for everything the colleges benefit from these players. Some of the biggest stars in college football benefit their schools a lot, and you can see why the players should get something back from it. But now it's gotten to a point where it kind of gets out of hand in some instances. You got a lot of players going somewhere for just the money, not really investing in the colleges that they go to, the atmosphere, the community, the student body, everything like that. It's getting to a point now where most of it is just based on that. And that's kind of where everyone gets lost in this subject. Some people feel that's wrong. Some people feel it's right. And, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but this quote was pretty interesting because of that, because it just touches on the whole situation. And something else that I saw more recently was the, EA Sports is coming out with the new college football game. That was announced a few days ago. The trailer was announced for that a few days ago. And a recent report came out that said EA Sports finalized its NIL plan and will begin the opt-in process for over 11,000 college sports athletes, players, and all those players that opt in to be in the game, to provide their notoriety, their name, image, and likeness, and stuff like that. All those players that opt in will receive $600 initially, plus a free copy of the game, which is which is pretty sweet. I'm not going to lie. And they'll also, more importantly, be paid annually on top of that as long as they're on a college roster, still playing college football, and will receive an annual pay. I didn't see how much it was, but the report was they'll continue to be paid almost like a salary if they just are in the game and opt into that process. And that it's pretty wild to think of what point we're at now because of this scenario with NIL and college football transferring for more money and stuff like that. It's tough because, like I mentioned before, the players, you want them to get compensated for something, and the coaches are frustrated now because you can imagine how hard it is to build something special, a program that you're really invested in, and then not being sure what these players, these kids really are thinking in the moment. If they're not getting playing time, a lot of them will just take their stuff and leave. It's becoming more rare to see players accept that they're not the stars. Coming from a situation in high school where most of these guys playing in college at a Division I level are the stars in their high school program. They see a lot of success. They're always playing. Now when they get to college, they expect the same thing. And if they don't get it, they'll pick up their things and leave. None of them will stick around, fight for a spot, or really invest in a student program or a college program and be loyal to that, as we've seen in the past before NIL. And it's a shame to see that, but also on top of that, to build on that, now with college basketball starting, Jay Bilas is on ESPN a lot more. He's more of a prominent figure in that because of the season we're in with college basketball. And they asked him about it on the Rich Eisen show, about what he thinks is a good fix for it. And he simply said to pay these college athletes as if they were actual players, hand them out contracts, and make them loyal, make them responsible for that contract that they sign. And at this point, because one of the things he said was that college amateurism at this point is basically dead. It almost doesn't exist anymore, and because of that, you have to treat these players like they're professionals in some aspect because of the kind of money that they're bringing in for themselves, the kind of attention they're bringing in for the colleges, and the business side of college football itself is taken over really at this point. And that idea that these players are student athletes, they're getting a chance to not only go to school, but to also live out their dream and play sports. You can almost agree with it that it's gone because of the amount of money and the business side of it. And just on his point that he made about contracts, I think it was more of a spurt in the moment, the way he said it. If you really think about it, having contracts in there for student athletes might even make this problem worse. And in my opinion, it could probably turn this into just college football losing its special quality that it has among fans and among everybody in the sports world that watches college football, because it's, kids, young athletes playing the sport that they love and, getting a chance to compete for championships, build themselves up, learn life lessons through college sports and with college coaches, and just learning special stuff to mature in their process of not only being better players but better humans and stuff like that. That aspect is almost being totally erased, and I think with contracts now, you're going to take away all the mystique around college football and what it's all about, the students, the student bodies and investing and stuff like that, and almost turn it into like the minor leagues, the G League for basketball terms. If you were to go that route and, hold these players accountable for contracts and clauses in their contract, special rules for them, then you got to include other things, probably guaranteed money at some point with college football and basketball for some of these guys. And then at that point, why would someone go to college if it's basically the same thing as going into, the G League right away or going overseas right away? If you monopolize it all just to limit the transfers and and some smaller schools not being fairly treated or have a fair chance of getting some of these bigger athletes because of the money available, I think you would erase everything, all the specialness that college football has in totality. Something else that I read on it, a possible solution for this and how college football and everybody can look for a solution for this was I found an article from the Columbus Dispatch. The author of it was Rob Aller, and he gave some solutions that I thought were worth mentioning on here that I thought were really good ideas. One of them was eliminating immediate eligibility upon transferring. It was actually a rule before 2021, and then the new rule changes came in, and it wasn't. They took it away, and it's a simple rule that was already working in college football before NIL and transfers got to this point. And, I think, first off, it would limit the amount of transfers that you see. A lot more players would have to, once they make the decision, know that they have to commit to it a lot more, because if they don't and want to change their mind and want to get out of there, they might lose a year. And some people might think that's unfair because, you're not in college for that often and it's a special time. But, you could argue that point and say, if it's so special and if these players truly mean that they want to go to a program and really build it up, then, there has to be something in there to make sure that they're held to that word, because these programs, these colleges invest a lot in them, and if they were to just lose them, especially at a smaller school, it's a lot of time wasted and it's a lot of steps back if, their whole program, their whole roster is gone, transferred after a year or two. Another thing that he said was that just shortening the transfer portal period in general. Technically, it's at 45 days now, just on the rules, but I think it should be shorter. I think it should be a month, 4 weeks, 28 days to be exact. Again, because you shorten that time of these players potentially getting other offers if they've already committed. You limit the amount of coaches probably that can get access to these players, because there's a lot of players out there and these coaches have to go to different places, and shortening the amount of time will limit how many coaches these players talk to and how many just opportunities they get to really decide. Because at the end of the day, you have to remember that these athletes, these players, are 18 to 23 years old in that period, and they're at a very important part of their life. And of course you want them to take it seriously, but you got to still remember how many people are making life-changing decisions at that age and making them wisely. I'm sure everyone would agree that making decisions there in your early 20s, late teens are definitely not your wisest decisions. A lot of impulse and just short-term thinking goes into that. And this is starting to become a lot more serious if they want to incorporate contracts like Jay Billis said. And the amount of money that's coming in, it's getting more serious. But at the same time, you have to remember to not make it, just to not monopolize it so much that, you eliminate that's something special that college football has at the end of the day. Because I think a lot of people are drawn to just that, athletes playing, young people, young players, kids playing their sports in college. It's a lot special just from what you see on College Game Day and the scenes you see around campuses, how special college football is, college basketball, and all the college sports, how united it makes all these schools, everyone gets together, and it's a whole special event. You want people, athletes, to build on that and just make that a whole thing, a special event, and you kind of lose some of that connection from the fans to these players if every year they're getting a new starting quarterback, a new running back that they can't really make that connection with, like in the pros or something like that. And I think that would really harm the sport, harm college sports in general. But that's sort of where it is right now. I thought those comments were interesting, and I thought it raised this question of, how far will this go before a misstep is taken and everything gets either a lot worse and you can't come back from it, or you do something now to limit the amount of harm you can do to some schools, some players, because it's getting close to that point, and these players are starting to make a lot of money, and it's the business side of it, unfortunately, that you have to watch out for. But let me know any other things that I might have missed around this whole situation, things you thought were right, some things maybe that other things you want to be changed in college football and college sports, and just your thoughts on it. That'll wrap it up for that segment. We're going to stick with the college football theme when I come back from another break, this time honing in more on Caleb Williams and his situation, not really draft-wise, but personal-wise, if you want to put it that way. He has decided to not go with an agent to represent himself, and I'll dive more into that topic after I take the second break of the show. But don't go anywhere. I have more stuff on Caleb Williams and regarding the draft on the other side of it. So I'll be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here again on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Moradiege, still here talking some more football-related news, diving into more of the college-related news in today's episode. If you missed the last segment, I talked about NIL, the transfer portal, and some reports by Adam Schefter talking about how some college coaches are frustrated by the current environment of college football and what that could mean going forward for the sport if it gets too far in one aspect, going into a lot of contracts, focusing on money more, and what could that do for the sport overall. But now, sticking on the topic of college football, I wanted to talk about Caleb Williams and his situation not going with an agent. But before I jump into that, I want to remind you guys to please use the tip and donations link with any questions that you may have. Again, this show gets a lot of engagement, a lot of questions from viewers during the show. So to make sure your question is seen, I can read it and it's put to the top of the list, please make sure to use the tip and donations link. That's streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork./tip. Again, if you can't see it on the screen and you're listening to this episode, the link for the tip and donations is streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork./tip. It's a big help for the show, for the network if you guys do this, and it just makes it easier for me to see your question and for all the questions to just pop up on there, and it would be greatly appreciated if you guys would do that. But our third segment, Caleb Williams, the presumably first overall pick in this year's draft. The talent is through the roof. Everything you would want in a quarterback, the generational type of ability, throw power, mobility, is able to run when he has to, and just creating those magical plays. It's all there for Caleb Williams. He has it all. And because of that, deciding not to go with an agent was the news that broke recently surrounding Caleb Williams. And if you recall, this was something not too rare, I want to say, because you saw the most recent example of this is Lamar Jackson. He hasn't, to my knowledge, had any agent during his time going into the NFL, and everyone saw it in that draft, how he fell during the NFL draft, and now a lot of people are thinking that it was because of that. He was a young player. there were some doubts about his throw power, how he would adapt to the NFL, but also not having an agent doesn't look great for a quarterback and a young quarterback that a franchise is going to invest a lot in. And a lot of people, it didn't sit right with them, and that's why now people are thinking that, that's why he fell, or a big reason why he fell in that year's draft. Obviously, everybody knows what he is now, and probably wouldn't, if they could do the draft over again, probably wouldn't draft him as the last pick, but without an agent, he was able to negotiate a contract extension and be among the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, so that all worked out well for him. As well as Bobby Wagner, he's another one that negotiated his own recent new contract, and it all worked out for him. One thing I remember seeing from him, like a reason he gave for this representing himself, was that, he's more mature, obviously, in the later part of his career, and he wants to challenge himself in other areas, and he felt that it was appropriate, and he was ready to take on that role, and again, it worked out for him. He negotiated a new contract himself and did a very good job of it. And there's not too many other examples of this. And other than this one, now that I wanted to talk about Caleb Williams not going with an agent, and it's not a big deal, in my opinion, now because of those two examples that I mentioned. I think franchises and organizations, owners are starting to become more open to it, and this was reported by Pro Football Talk, and it didn't gain too much traction, too much headlines from this, just because it's a different situation from anybody that we've seen. Usually, these top guys have a big team, agents, people that just help them with this transition period, and number one picks usually have a support team, have that help that I just mentioned. But with Caleb Williams, he has all that, the talent and everything to be the number one pick, but just no agent. And it's just different because he's been talked about for a long time now, and he's, in the same conversation as the Andrew Lucks, the Trevor Lawrences, those kind of guys that transcend any type of quarterback that anyone's seen over the last few years. And a lot of people recently have always said that, the hype around Trevor Lawrence was high, but they've never seen anything like Caleb Williams. And that's just funny because it's just, they never see it until the next quarterback comes around, right? The next generational quarterback comes around. There's always going to be a next one, but Caleb Williams is the guy right now, and he's so anticipated. Everyone expects him to be the number one pick already, that this won't really affect his stock too much, in my opinion, and a lot of people share that same opinion. But one personality, I guess, for lack of a better terms, in the media, Mike Florio said, he gave some of his negatives that could come from this. He said that, having a lack of someone to defend you behind the scenes in the inner circles with executives, front office members, people like that, Caleb Williams can't be in those meetings. It's usually just reserved for agents and executives away from the football side. Now you're talking about the business side. And coming into the NFL, your first year, you're still not officially a player. You're still a college athlete. You're not going to be represented well in those circles, in those meetings, those quiet backroom talks that agents have with these executives to get their guys drafted as high as possible. The negative of that is the issue that a lot of people don't want to mention is that these agents have to sell their clients to these teams, and at times that could mean talking down on somebody else, making the other guy look a lot worse. And unfortunately for Caleb Williams, his decision doesn't allow him to have somebody in those circles to defend him. I'm not saying it's right to have somebody else talk bad about somebody else, but it's part of the process that nobody mentions, but it definitely happens. It's reality. These agents have to do their best to sell their clients, and Caleb Williams, yes, he doesn't have that person, to hype him up, I guess, if you want to say, to executives and front office members. But again, he's at a point now where everyone has seen him and he almost doesn't need it, but it'll be interesting to see how it develops, if it actually does affect him a little bit, because everyone presumes that he's going to be the number one overall pick. But a lot of times there's always a surprise that's made in the draft. A team trades up, or the number one team just doesn't pick who you think. An example was when Saquon and Baker were coming into the draft, into the NFL. A lot of people had Saquon Barkley going one. Regardless if any team traded, it was always Saquon. Saquon, he was going to be the number one pick. And then it ended up being Baker Mayfield. And you get some other trades, when Mac Jones was being traded, or Mac Jones and Trey Lance and all those guys were being drafted. The 49ers made that trade to come up, and it throws everything off. And I'm not saying, Caleb Williams not having an agent will just make the Bears trade out of the first overall pick or make him just fall in general. I think he's done too much now, and there's been too much hype built around him. But nobody really knows how it'll affect him. You kind of saw it with Lamar Jackson, but he was never the presumably first overall pick. And, with him, it all turned out well. And there could be some positives with this, just that I wanted to bring up from my point of view. If I was an executive and if I was someone evaluating Caleb Williams, I would say, to me, as a person, it shows a lot of maturity from Caleb Williams, to feel like, if you're Caleb Williams, to have that mature level to yourself, to think you're able to do that at such a young age, coming into the NFL. I think that's something that would interest me if I was an executive, picking in the top 5, top 3. I think that's something I would want to learn more about and could potentially benefit more because, you're directly talking to him about business, about contracts, about how he's feeling. You don't have to go through another party and kind of have that level of communication sort of interrupted. The direct communication is going with the player. You can get exactly how he feels, where his mind is at, and always talk to him. Have that level of communication is always better. And at the same time, for him, it's just more decision-making falls on him. He could really evaluate what he feels, what he wants to do, rather than having, his agent bringing up other options, other opportunities, potentially more money elsewhere. It all falls on him. He could sit down and evaluate everything for himself. And just going back to and kind of connecting it back to NIL and college athletes. Now, I think it's not really a trend right now, but I feel like it's going to become more of a trend because these players are now being held more accountable. There's more money involved. There's more responsibility involved. And I think we're going to see these younger people make more money earlier in their careers, regardless if they go to the pros or not. College sports are almost already like the pros. They're going to be making more important decisions earlier on, and I think the no agent thing is going to start to become more of a trend with these guys that are always being built up and always have the media attention around them. They're going to start making some more important decisions earlier on, and I think it will become a regular. We're going to see more quarterbacks, more defensive players be representing themselves because it's all starting to fall on them a lot more from an earlier age that it could benefit them in some way. They could accept it, run with it, and grow because of it, get more mature because of it. Or some of them, it will harm them. They'll realize that, this might not be for them, and they might require an agent, or it might harm them further more than that. And I think right now we're in the early stages of that, but I believe it won't be long until we see this start to become a trend, as well as other things, potentially players starting their own agency, running their own agency and stuff like that, and having more business savvy traits about them that players in the past that we've seen not have. And it's very interesting to talk about it. Of course, it's in the early stages, like I mentioned, but I think Caleb Williams is one example of it starting to pick up a little bit with him and all the attention he gets. And I think it's just going to be, he's going to trailblaze a new path for athletes to kind of follow him. And if it all works out, really good for him and he benefits, makes a lot of money, has a great career, the process, the pace that this is all ramping up will only increase a lot more if he has a lot of success in the league and more players will jump on the opportunity and basically just copy him because of the level of success that he had. It's something interesting to think about. It kind of got my mind thinking of where this could all end up once I saw the news of him not having an agent. And hopefully it all works out for him. He looks like a great player, a lot of talent to him. Hopefully he gets to an NFL organization that is able to get all that talent out of him and get all the skills out of him as well to benefit him and have a great career. And that's where we're going to leave that topic. A very interesting one I thought to bring up here. And for now, I'm going to send it to another quick break, the last break of the show. And we're going to come back and talk about a more of an open-ended question about the draft, whether it's better to draft a franchise guy because you're in a top position in the draft to just get your franchise guy out of the way, get him on your team, or is it better to play the long game, stockpile drafts, improve your team around a temporary quarterback, and then bring in a quarterback when your team is ready and up for the challenge of developing that quarterback? That'll be on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. There's going to be a lot to talk about that. So we'll be right back. Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. I'm still your host, Manny Maradiege, and we've arrived to potentially my favorite part of the show. I try to always make these last segments something open-ended, something with a lot of opinion for you guys that watch the live episode, or if you guys tune in afterwards, or potentially just catch the individual segment afterwards on the Sports Network channel or the Podcast Network channel. To make it more open-ended, I would love for you guys to give me your opinions on it and let me know what you guys think. And today we have the unanswerable question, if you wanna phrase it like that. Waiting on a quarterback or drafting him regardless of the quality of your team, regardless of how many questions you have on this team. And initially, I understand that at this point, by the time you get to the draft, you're still going to have a lot of questions about your team, potentially some coaching, executive, player, personnel, questions and decisions that are still going to be made, but that goes for all teams, and I think some are definitely more ready than others, regardless of how uncertain it may look. Most people know with some organizations how ready they are just within the organization or from our perspective as fans or media, how ready they are to really develop a young quarterback and how important it is to develop him the right way and surround him with the right amount of support that they need to thrive in the NFL. And this mostly revolves around the three teams, I think, that are picking in the first three spots in the NFL draft, that being the Chicago Bears, Washington Commanders, and the New England Patriots. right off the bat, I could argue, I should say, that all three of these teams are not ready to draft a franchise guy and compete once the season starts. And when I mean compete, I mean like seriously be a playoff threat, get past the first round, that level of compete. I don't think any of these top three teams are realistically ready or at that point in their process of, rebuilding their organization, their teams, they're making them competitive. For a plethora of reasons, I want to start with the Bears. I think they might be the most furthest along, just based on their scenario. They're in the NFC North, in the NFC Conference in general. It's not as strong as the AFC if you're talking about the Patriots. And with the Bears, I stressed this yesterday, they could really keep Justin Fields if they want to. He's not. I don't want to trash like another quarterback like Josh Rosen just comes to mind. He was picked top 10. I don't think he actually was picked top 10. He might have been 11. I can't remember right now. But, picking a guy like that, having him in your organization right away, and then not having it work out similarly to Justin Fields not working out with the Bears. But it's different because the talent level I think you get from Josh Rosen and Justin Fields is very different. Even if you want to bring up other ones like Zach Wilson, who was picked in the top 3. Again, another one that didn't work out, but I think that was due more to him not fitting in or just being not showing a level of maturity that I think was needed with the Jets at that moment. And now, because they have Aaron Rodgers, it didn't work out. I think with Justin Fields, it has to do more with the organization not being able to support him enough and really giving up on him a little bit too early, I think. I know they're in a situation where they're picking one. How often do you get to pick number 1 in the draft and have the opportunity to draft a Caleb Williams that I just talked about in the last segment? I know all that is tough, having the pressure of that. I'm sure they're getting offers to trade back and stuff like that, and that's honestly what I think they should do. I think they still have time where they're in the process of still rebuilding this team, still finding their identity, changing coordinators. Matt Eberflus is now calling the plays on the defensive side of the ball, and they're still in this process of they're not ready yet. I think a lot of people would agree with me there. They're not ready just based on the season that they had. They were 7-10 with Justin Fields, and a lot of those games I thought he played well. He kept the minute. He used his ability to run. And in some games, the offense ran very well with him. And they didn't look like this just disaster on the field. It was other areas of their team that I thought they needed to improve to compete a lot more. One of it is maybe getting a better running back. There are free agent running backs out there that you can get and bolster this offense. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry are just some of the names. Tony Pollard could be a cheaper option for the Chicago Bears. They were among the league leaders in rushing yards and just rushing game overall with a below-average offensive line that, in my opinion, I believe that they had. They just cut one of their starting guards to start the free agency period, and because of that, he was one of their better players, and now not only do they need to replace him, but overall the offensive line I still think needs work. If you want to I were to throw some stats out for some of you guys. Justin Fields was sacked the 5th most times in the NFL, and that was with their O-line that they had right now. Him playing, he was still sacked the 5th most times, and they were top 2 in rushing and yards per game with, I can't remember the name of the running back right now, but it wasn't someone of a prominent level name, and I think they could really fix that O-line a lot more, and it'll benefit Justin a lot more. And if they were to draft Caleb Williams, how much better would he be? If you want to say he's more talented than Justin Fields, you can say that, but for as much talent that he has, it's almost he can only have so much time before he has to throw the ball. And who is he throwing that ball to? Cole Kmet and DJ Moore are good options, but even that they could improve upon and get more weapons for whichever quarterback that they have. And on top of that, their defense isn't that bad. They were in the middle of the pack, really, in stats. And you can work with that as long as you have a better offense, more potent offense, with a good O-line, too. Be on the field longer to give that defense a bit of a rest and, help them out a lot more, because I think with Eberflus calling the plays on defense now, he comes from a defensive background. I think that'll improve a little bit more, but it won't really do anything to this team if offensively they're still stuck in the same loop of having a talented quarterback but no support around him. And, I believe that they could keep Fields, trade back. It's an unpopular opinion, but I feel like it would benefit them the most. They could get a few first-round picks for that pick just because of how much hype Caleb Williams has gotten, and do a lot more to bolster this offense, sign some free agents, and be more competitive in the long run. The same could almost go for the Washington Commanders. Sam Howell was definitely worse statistically than Justin Fields, but he was sacked the most times in the NFL this past season. 65 times he was sacked. And for anyone that can only imagine, like me, what it is like to be sacked and be tackled that amount of times in a season, it's crazy. And at some point it does affect the quarterback, because if they feel unsafe sitting in that pocket, they're not going to make the right read just because they're always, flinching or just anticipating the hit before it even gets through, or there might not be any pressure at all, but they've been hit so many times that it's a natural reaction now at this point to brace themselves and not really focus in on making the right read, and it leads to more mistakes. And similarly, they could fix the offensive line and get some more compliments to Terry McLaurin. And I like Jahan Dotson as well, but I think other than that, you don't really have too many explosive options, especially to compete in their division with the Cowboys, the Eagles that have big-name playmakers on offense and very solid defenses. I don't think just having Terry McLaurin as really your star player is enough to compete with them, regardless of who your quarterback is. Sam Howell, I think, was only given the one year minimal amount of time to prove himself. I think now with Dan Quinn, with a new head coach coming in, you're always going to want to replace, more often than not, the quarterback that was just there. But I think he can work with it just because he's more of a defensive coach anyway, and that defense is still pretty solid. And I think with him being a defensive coach, in the same time, he might want to bolster that defense and make sure his side of the ball that he's more comfortable with is firing on all cylinders, is very secure, the most secure part of that team. I think drafting a quarterback would keep, obviously, the defense at the same level and wouldn't do much to improve the offense overall, because if you have no one to throw to, how much success is that rookie quarterback going to have if it's Jaden Daniels or Drake May? And with a bad O-line, how, safe are they going to be taking sacks probably the same amount of times, potentially less than Sam Howell did? And there's been a lot of talks with other teams that want to trade up to that spot. The Atlanta Falcons make the most sense because the Commanders will still stay in the top 10. They'll still have the option to draft a very solid offensive lineman or defensive player if they want to. A pass rusher, after losing Montez Sweat, would be a good candidate, even a corner at that position if they wanted to go that route, or even trade back a little bit less with the 8th pick, trade back into the teens with somebody else, and now you're stockpiling a lot more picks, a couple potentially in the first round or in the second round, where you're still able to get very good players. And you might not have an amazing season now that Sam Howell gets another year and for some reason he figures it all out. That's not likely, but at least you have everybody else in place to have success. And then next year, if you're still middle of the pack, below in the bottom 10, you're still going to have an option to go after a quarterback or sign one in free agency and just go off of that. And then the Patriots, are probably in the most dire of situations compared to the other two. I don't think anybody could support the idea that the Patriots, once they get a different quarterback in here, that instantly they're going to be back to competing for that division. The level of the division is a lot higher than what they're probably going to produce next season. They're going to have a new head coach, a lot of new people on that coaching staff, virtually no star-studded options for any quarterback to throw to. I think that, honestly, I should have found more of their personnel names that the Patriots had, but other than Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, they're not going to compete with a Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, these type of level of guys that are just in their division. That's not going to do it, regardless of who their quarterback is. Again, some more stats to back it up. They were sacked one of the fewest. They were the teams that had fewer passing yards in the NFL. They were bottom 3 in touchdowns thrown, and again, they were basically supported with no running game in the same time. No running back on the roster was in the top 32 in terms of rushing yards, and no wide receiver was even in the top 50 of league leaders in receiving yards as well. That alone just shows you who's Jaden Daniels, Drake May going to throw to. They have all the talent, but they can't throw the ball to themselves. They're going to have to find some help there. A lot of mock drafts have them drafting Marvin Harrison, other receivers. Malik Neighbors is a great player as well. They could draft a really good wide receiver, and Mac Jones probably won't be the quarterback next year. Bailey Zappi potentially might not be either. But again, there's a lot of free agent quarterbacks that are good options for them that I believe not only could do a better job than Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, but could bring a level of maturity, safeness, security that this team hasn't really had with Mac Jones because he was drafted, as a rookie and everything. Bailey Zappi as well was a young quarterback. I think this team at this point needs leadership and to build up their roster, because if they draft a quarterback and it all goes really bad, it's still bad on offense. They had a pretty good defense, but if it's still really bad on offense, Gerard Mayo, unfortunately, won't last long there, and I don't think it's fair for him to do that. Sorry about that. There was a problem in the studio. But regardless, what I was saying was that it could end up really bad for Gerard Mayo if he takes this risk, gets the quarterback that he wants just because he's able to, and then he's out of a job, and the Patriots have to start this process over again, new head coach. If their quarterback performs really bad, you can bet everything that a lot of people will think it's on the quarterback. He wasn't fit for the job, and there's going to be talk about, again, or should they draft another quarterback? Was he ready? Should they bring in a veteran to kind of groom him a little bit? It's not, more often than not, it's not going to work out if you just draft the quarterback right away and just bank on his talent level to fix everything. It just doesn't work like that in the NFL, especially because it's such a reliant sport on the teammates, on everybody else to work as a unit, and it can't all just fall to one guy essentially saving an organization, a franchise, and just fixing every problem with the snap of their fingers. But that's kind of where my mindset's at with them. Most people will think that they're going to draft a quarterback, and if they do, I don't wish the worst upon them, but I just find it tough to see any of these quarterbacks flipping their organizations 180 and competing right away, because they're all in tough situations, tough divisions, that it's going to be extremely hard to do that. But again, I'm very interested to know what you guys think of this. It's a very interesting topic, that always pops up in all these drafts with high-end quarterbacks and teams trying to make a decision of what to do in the offseason. But that's going to do it for all the time I have today for this episode. As always, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by by the GSMC Sports Network. Your engagement, reactions, everything means a lot to us and to me, so please remember to subscribe, like, and comment on the show, as well as checking out all the other content that we have on other social medias like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as checking out the YouTube channels for other shows, as well as this show. If you couldn't catch all of it, the live segment, there's YouTube shorts, individual segments broken up from this episode for you guys to check out around the NFL and football in general for more discussion and stuff like that. But for now, that'll do it all for me. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.